Lisa Bodenburg, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Lisa, it is such an honor to have you. For our listeners who may not be familiar with you and your work, who are you and what do you do?
I am a United States Marine. I have worked in aviation as a Huey helicopter door gunner for many years. I now work as a civilian in fitness and nutrition.
Lisa, what I like to do is just have you tell your remarkable journey. My introduction to your career and your service is from this book here. Jame Patterson, maybe one of the most read people on the planet. I think he's like author of the decade. I was walking in the airport one day on a trip and I saw Walk in My Combat Boots. I'm like, wow, I'm getting that one. And I'm reading it, and it's a book full of amazing stories. Yours stood out. The book's called The Most Moving and Powerful War Stories Ever Told by the Men and Women Who Live Them, written by Jame Patterson. Let's get going. Grew up in Buffalo, New York. Can you remember the first time you ever had the idea of serving our country?
Yes, it was a junior in high school. I was already a part of what was called the Explorer program, which was where they take youth and start basically a small club that teaches them how to become police officers. So we have meetings, we have uniforms, we take the written exam, the same written exam as the police officers in our town. We go to the range and we shoot weapons, etc. And we get involved with other organizations and competitions. So I had that in my back pocket. And I was a junior in high school when my history teacher was teaching us about American history. And prior to this, you had already learned about every other country's history. It really isn't until this point in my life where I'm learning so deeply about American history. And I just felt this overwhelming sense of pride and the need to earn my place in this country. Whereas I feel like most people, especially as I get older, I feel it even more. Everyone feels like they have their rights, but although we do have our rights, I feel like it's necessary to earn them. And so I knew it was my journey to earn them for myself and for those who couldn't.
That's amazing. One of the quotes I read in the book I just love, you wrote, "It's a privilege to be in this country. It's not a right. And I've been driven by an overwhelming need to earn that privilege every day." So epic. That's a baller quote. Where do you think that comes from?
I don't know, but it brings me to tears listening to you read what I said. I believe it. It's just in my bones. It's who I am. I think a lot of this as I get older, we can work on our mindset, and it's very natural to be negative. It's very natural
Mhm.
to be in this victim mentality. And oftentimes that's celebrated in today's society. And I think it's terrible. We're so much stronger than we give ourselves credit for, and we can do so much more than we think we can do. So the ability to just be a citizen of this country is such a blessing. And if you don't recognize that, I encourage you to travel to other countries. I encourage you to travel to places where it's extremely impoverished and it's extremely difficult to be a female. So if you don't recognize that, I really don't know how to help you.
There was an author, I forget who said it, but I heard this a few weeks back. They said one of the problems in the United States today is that there's a Statue of Liberty, but not a Statue of Responsibility.
Oh,
And
that is a fantastic
it's
quote.
pretty baller. I can't take credit, but I heard it. I wrote it down when I heard it. But let's get to your career. I mean, you literally fast forward, you become one of the first UE crew chief door gunners. Absolutely crazy. When you told a teacher that you wanted to join the United States Marine Corps, you were told you're throwing your life away. Where's that come from?
I think it comes from a good place. He was the same teacher who was my history teacher, who actually, through his teachings, lit this flame inside of me. I had wonderful coaches and teachers who saw a great deal of potential in me. And I had earned a scholarship, a free ride to college. So they were definitely coming from a good place, but also many people think that there's this cookie cutter plan that everyone has to graduate high school, then go to college, then find a good job that you do 20 plus years, and then you retire.
Mhm.
Well, that's not the same for everyone. And thank God I didn't listen to them, because the Marine Corps has been the greatest joy and honor of my life. It is such a privilege to serve this country, especially in the capacity I've been allowed to.
You say in the book, quote, you were a military recruiter's dream. You literally walked in, and what did you tell them? What did you tell the story? What did you say?
I said, "Hi, my name's Lisa. I want to be Force Recon. Sign me up." And so they chuckled a little bit, because remember, this is 2006. And
Okay.
back then, females weren't allowed in positions like that. We weren't allowed on the ground or in infantry positions. And so when they realized that I was serious, they kind of sat me down and had to educate me that this would literally take an act of Congress, that this is not going to happen. And so I was so upset I left and I went to college.
Mhm.
It was my first semester in college, and I realized, okay, maybe I could settle down a little bit and find some other options here, because this is definitely not for me. I went back and chatted with them further, and I said, well, okay, I am not the person that I can't do paperwork. I'm not going to be on a computer. I want to be on the front lines. What's the most combative position I can have as a female if I can't do that? And so this old gunny steps out of this back office. He like creeps out of his, his hole in the back. And he's like, well, you could be a door gunner. And the other recruiters didn't even really know what that was. It was like this illustrious position. Like, well, what's a Huey door gunner? I didn't even know what a Huey was, but I was like, great, sign me up.
And for those listening that may know who the Marine Corps are, but what's the difference between like you're a Marine, but you're a Force Recon Marine? What's the difference between the two? Can you describe that?
Every branch has their own or little group of special forces. So every branch has a group of individuals who are highly trained and specialized in something very specific. The special forces portion of the Marine Corps used to be called Force Recon. We have since changed to what's called MARSOC.
When you say Huey door gunner, what is that?
A Huey is a small type of helicopter, and its primary missions are their attack helicopters. So Hueys and Cobras are put together in the aviation community, because they both had skids, is a long tube on the bottom. So the helicopter has to pick up and taxi to hover and move elsewhere, whereas other helicopters have wheels. They can just kind of drive, similar to the way that a fixed wing aircraft would drive off of the taxiway. So a Huey helicopter, Hueys and Cobras have skids, and they have a lot of rockets and guns on them, and their primary missions are to attack and to help assist the guys on the ground when they need help.
So not only did you say you wanted to be a door gunner, you had to be the honor grad twice to pull it off. And after you pulled it off, you still got some pushback. Can you tell that story?
Yes. So when the recruiters were ready to sign me up for this, they were trying to find a slot for me to take in order to sign me up for this job. Well, there wasn't any spots on the East Coast. They said they could send me, and if I graduated honor graduate, I could take one of the West Coast spots. So long story short, I said, yeah, sure, sign me up. They were kind of like, well, you don't really understand. I mean, you have to be the number one. You can't be the number two. You have to be the best at everything. And I just said, okay, I'm up for the challenge. I know I'll do this. And so I did. I earned the title of honor graduate with my platoon in boot camp. And when I was graduating, the company commander came to me and said that they don't have a spot for me for the job that I want, but they were going to put me in something similar. So they put me in aviation, which they originally signed me up to be crash fire rescue. They said, when I go to my next school, speak to the master gunnery sergeant there. And with my track record being an honor graduate, maybe he could help me assign me a West Coast spot. So I did, and I signed up. I showed up, and the master gunnery sergeant basically was like, I don't give two craps about what you did, honor graduate out of boot camp. You're at my school now. He said, I'll tell you what, you graduate honor graduate out of my school, then I'll give you what you want. I'm like, Roger that.
Mhm.
But this time I'm up against men. It wasn't just women.
Mhm.
So I'm in this, group of Marines, men and women combined. We're doing this incredible training out in the field, and it was neck and neck with one of the other Marines. And it came down to a gun test on the M240, and I scored higher, which gave me the points that I needed, and I graduated honor graduate.
And then even after you did that, there was still some pushback then, right?
Yes, that was at another school. So after MCT, that was the second time that I had to fight for that. You go to Naval Air Crew School in Pensacola, Florida. And so I went through that school and again, graduated honor graduate. And upon graduating, I'm standing there in line with 3 or 4 of my other fellow Marines, because at this point we go through this school with the Navy. And so the Marines get pulled aside, and the gunnery sergeant there was wearing combat aircrew wings on his camis. We didn't know what that was. We were just now learning what aircrew wings were, which are the gold wings, which we had just earned, and we were about to go to the next school to be pinned with them if we made it through the next school. So we just made it through Naval Aircrew School, and the gunnery sergeant there is looking at all of us, and he's assigning all of us to different helicopters, where they're called platforms in the Marine Corps. So C-130s, at the time we had 46s, 53s, Hueys, and Cobras, right? Hueys. So he's going down the line and he asks the guys what they want. He gave them 2 options of whatever what was available. And it was 46s or Hueys. And they would say, 46s gunny, 46s or Hueys, 46s gunny, Hueys gunny, whatever they asked, he gave them. And he gets to me and he looks at me and he says 46s. And I said, excuse me, gunnery sergeant, I was told that if I honor graduate at this school, I would get to pick my platform. And he said, well, what do you want? And I said, Hueys. He said, no, you're 46s. And he's writing, and I'm watching him write my future with this pen and paper right in front of me. And I was so scared to speak up to him. He's a gunnery sergeant, and come to find out, and actually he was a Huey door gunner himself. And so I said, I'm sorry, Gunny, but no, I want Hueys. I said, I want Hueys. And he stops and he looks at me, and I'm fully prepared to get an ass chewing. And he said, you dig your own grave. And he gave me Hueys.
Wow. That is so ballsy. Oh my gosh. Speaking up to the gunny, man, and you could dig your own grave. Oh my gosh. That is so legit. How'd that feel when you made him change? That's a sale right there. If you're in the business world, they call that a big sale. How'd that feel when you saw him scratch that out and put Huey down?
Oh, I felt great. Because I had finally accomplished, this is almost a year of me being in the Marine Corps, going through all these schools. And from day one, since I signed the contract saying that I wanted to be a Marine, this is what I wanted to do. I've been fighting for this the entire time. And it felt like every time I would accomplish the goalpost was moved further away. So it was like, what else do you want from me? Until finally that moment, my dreams were coming true. And it felt wonderful. I was excited, and the guys that I were with were excited that I was going with them. I had made friends, and they chose Hueys because they had that same drive and that same spirit that I had. And we were excited. It was fantastic.
Wow. The founders, the explorers, the trendsetters, the trend breakers, like you literally have to knock the obstacles down for the people behind you to come through, right? And you're hitting stuff that if you went through the same thing today, completely different experience, right?
Oh, absolutely. I've been so blessed in the last 18 years since joining the Marine Corps to have had women reach out to me, men and women reach out asking for guidance on their path. But more importantly, women asking me advice on what to do and telling me that they've heard stories about me or thanking me for paving the way for them, that they were able to get in this position. And I just think that still blows my mind. I didn't do anything special. And I don't want anyone to think that I did. I did the requirements, and the requirements are a standard for a reason. I didn't do anything more or less than the men that were standing next to me. The only difference is that I had to fight for the chance to do it. So I'm really nobody special. I wouldn't take no for an answer.
You would not take no for an answer. That's unbelievable. How about this? So let's fast forward. You're a Huey door gunner, right? And you said there was a big difference in the culture between your first team and second team. Could you speak about what you saw your first team and looking back, what you thought, what you kind of realized it was compared to your second team?
My first squadron was an incredible example of poor leadership and what not to do, how not to lead, and how not to be. And I learned from that, and I made mistakes as well. And I've spoken to a lot of those guys since then. The deployment was very difficult for me. I was a target of a lot of hazing, and I don't say that lightly. It actually took me a very long time to admit to myself that was hazing, because I never wanted to be the person to say, I never wanted to be the black sheep. I never wanted to admit that just because I'm a female, X, Y, and Z. I also didn't want people to think that because I'm a female, I wanted them to take it easy on me. I I refused when that happened as well. There were instances where people would be able to do that. They would try to take it easy on me, and I would stand up and be like, absolutely not. You will hold me to the same standard. I will never look back and have to say that I didn't earn this. So it's a double-edged sword. And the first command it was terrible. And like I said, I've spoken to a lot of those guys since then, and I've had some of the toughest, worst guys that treated me the worst over there reach out and apologize.
Wow.
And I believe that they were also a product of poor leadership. So I don't blame them. They were very young. We all were. And then my second command, by the grace of God, was the complete opposite. And I have had incredible leaders and incredible commands since then, but none will ever set the bar to the Vipers in 2009. From the CO all the way down to my division chief, and even my NCOs, my fellow, NCOs and staff NCOs were phenomenal. And I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to serve with them.
It's like what Jocko's team says, everything rises and falls with leadership, right? The leader sets the tone, sets the culture, and no bad teams, just bad leaders, right? This is taken from a different part of the book, but you mentioned like the mind games or the mindset that you need to be like a trailblazer that you are. You wrote this, and I just found this very powerful. I spend a lot of nights scared. There are a lot of tears and plenty of days when I have zero motivation. On those days, the only thing I know how to do is take the next step. When the alarm goes off, I get out of bed. Next step. I put on my boots. Next step. I walk to class. It's all about the next step. These small, everyday victories. It's all a mental game.
Yes, it is. It's
Wow.
one step at a time, because although you have a big goal in front of you, take an elite athlete. Let's say that the Olympics are their goal, and things aren't going right, and they're having a bad training day, and they're not getting the stats they need, or whatever the case. It doesn't mean you stop. It doesn't mean you give up. You just focus on the very next thing, and you do your best at the very next step that you can do. And if you just continue to do that, you incrementally can become better and wiser, and you just 1% at a time.
That principle, like you can take that, and even if you're not in a combat world, but that mindset, you could take that in the business field, you could take it to your family, you could take it to any organization you're in. That's such like a winning mindset and attitude. Now, thank you for sharing that. How about this? Two questions here. Here's one. You served in Iraq, you served in Afghanistan. How would you compare, contrast? Like you're on two completely different theaters, but they're like the two epic battles of our lifetime, of this generation's lifetime, Iraq and Afghanistan. How would you compare and contrast the two deployments?
It all just depends on the time frame of when an individual was over there, as well as the location they were in. Sometimes there was a lot more action happening in one part of the country and a lot quieter in other parts. My particular time, Iraq was quite quiet, and Afghanistan was hell.
Wow. How much time did you spend in each theater?
The deployments are 7 months. So I did rotations, 7 months gone, 11 months home, but I switched squadrons in the middle of that. So I did 7 months forward, 4 months home, 7 months forward, 11 months home.
You're saying that in the course of 18 months, 14 of them you're away. Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. You are a badass, no doubt about it. And what type of physical or mental stress does that put on an individual? You're in the prime of your life, you're probably 20, 21 years old. Being in a battlefield for that long, what's the average person go through? What did you go through? If you don't mind sharing.
Well, my job was, every day to leave the wire, to leave the line and go forward into the battle space. We were short crew chiefs, so there were no days off for us. So it was a very high tempo, fast paced, high stress environment for a very long period of time. We were given pills that were they were just labeled uppers and downers. And I don't, still to this day, don't know what type of pills they were. But when we needed to be awake, even after a 16-hour shift and the tick alarm goes off and there's men on the ground that need us, you take an upper and you go and you do your job and you save their life. It doesn't matter how tired you are. That's not an option. And then adversely, if you needed to go to sleep because you just came off of a high stress scenario and you can't sleep, but you only have 8 hours before you have to get up again, you take a downer. It's stressful on the mind and on the body. I came back looking quite older than I was. Wrinkles on my face, very noticeable, aged skin, etc. So like the physical portion, not to mention how physical the job was. I had to have a couple surgeries from that. And everyone does, every one of us in that community. It's not just me.
Mhm.
We had to deal with it. But when you're there, it just is what it is. It's just the job. You know what you're signing up for, and that's what you're trained for. And that's, you're grateful to be there to do your job. But when you come home, that's when you start to set your pack down and peel back the layers. And that's when the emotional portion comes out that you really have to deal with.
A few podcasts I listened to, you spoke pretty openly about some of the mental side of things. Can you speak to your mental challenges? Would you mind going there?
Mind at all. I struggled coming back the last time, and then I had surgery, and then I found out I had to get out of the Marine Corps, which was not it was unplanned. So I was struggling with so much and a loss of, camaraderie and community and purpose, not to mention everything from the wars. And I struggled with depression and suicide. And I didn't talk about it. I was so afraid because I had fought this stigma of the fact that I was a female, that I couldn't do the job, I'd never make it, I'd never be good enough. And I fought that for so many years. I felt that if I came out and spoke about the mental portion, that everyone was going to be able to look back and say, I told you so. I told you you couldn't handle it. It's because you're a female.
Wow.
But I was asked to do like a short video on my time over there. And when they were going to release it, I was so scared. I was so hesitant. And they were very gracious with me. And they told me, okay, we won't if you don't want to. And so I took some time and I thought about it and prayed on it. And I knew it was the right thing to do to release it. And ironically enough, those exact men that I were afraid of that would have that attitude reached out to me saying, thank you so much for what you said. Your video helped me get through another day.
That is so powerful. Is that the one on YouTube now?
I've done quite a few since
Yeah.
that. The
I,
first one is, I'm not sure if it's on YouTube. It's definitely on Facebook, but it was a video done by Mission Barbecue.
that's the one I watched that twice. That is so powerful. And the one where you said like a friend of a roommate of a friend was knocked on the door just at the right time. Would you mind telling that? I found that amazing. It's just the timing is everything.
Yes, definitely. I'm a Christian. I'm a firm believer that the Lord is real and tangible. And this story, I think, is proof of that, of what a miracle happened that day. But I had made the decision in my mind. I knew exactly what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. I came home cleaned my entire house because I didn't want whomever was going to come into my house to have to deal with a dirty home after I had killed myself. Like that was my mindset.
Wow.
I wrote a letter to my nieces and nephew, and I had everything tidy and in order. And I went up the stairs and loaded my weapon, and I'm about to pull the trigger, and there's a knock at my door. And I'm thinking, I'm almost annoyed. Like, who the heck is bothering me right now? Like, I have business to take care of. And I hear this voice, and it's my neighbor, Shannon. And long story short, a text message that I had sent to a friend of mine didn't sit with her right, but I didn't tell her what I was doing or what I was thinking or anything. She just said it didn't sit with her right, and she was out of town. So the only person she knew to contact was my neighbor, Curtis. Curtis wasn't home either. He's a flight attendant. So Curtis called his roommate, Shannon. So Shannon was home, and Shannon came and knocked on my door. So all these people, three levels of separation, felt it so serious on their heart to follow through with this. And it's the reason I'm alive today.
Wow. That's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon saving the day. It's like
Yeah.
it's so crazy. And like just at that moment, like your friend's roommate or whatever, roommate's friend's roommate knocked on the door, and you didn't even answer the door, did you? Just they kind of stopped you what you were doing, right?
The first time I did not answer the door. No. I just stopped and I put the weapon down, and I was afraid she would walk in because she had a key. She had a code to my house. And so I didn't want her to find me. That was my biggest concern. Like, who was going to find my body? And I didn't want to put that burden on someone. I didn't want someone to have to see that. And that was my biggest concern and my biggest piece of the puzzle of how I was going to plan this. And so I stopped thinking that she was going to come in. She walked away. Maybe 20 minutes later, she came back and she came in.
Whoa. Okay.
So I was so, obviously for other reasons, I'm glad I didn't do it. But at that moment, I was like, oh, thank God I didn't, because I would have never wanted her to have to see that. So she came in and found me in my bed, knew exactly what I was planning on doing. And she just laid with me and cried with me, and we just talked it out. And I went and I got help from there. And it was a long road. It wasn't like overnight I was better. It was a long road. My brother got involved, people got involved. And it was the more because I wasn't talking about it. Nobody knew.
Mhm.
I was always the fun person and the happy person and the person who everyone came to with their problems. So I didn't feel comfortable telling anyone my problems or my struggles.
Mhm. Wow.
But yeah,
You had a great quote. It sounded like almost like a Brene Brown. Are you familiar with Brene Brown?
yes, I love
And
her.
yeah, she's amazing. And you had a quote in the book. It says, "I found strength through vulnerability," where you thought you couldn't talk about it, but once you started speaking about it, it gave you strength, right?
Yes, in two ways. It was such a burden lifted off of my shoulders. It felt so much lighter to be able to talk about it. And the second way is because I'm a natural helper. I want to help other people. And when I realized that me talking about it helps other people realize that they can talk about it too, and helps them in their struggles, it only fueled my fire more to be so willing to talk about it openly.
Wow, that's great. You think it looks for the human nature, for some reason, we all get this vibe or thought that when we speak about our weaknesses, we will become weaker. People look down at us. But what that does is it actually gives us strength, because it allows other people, it gives them an avenue to go, oh my gosh, me too. People you would have never thought of, they struggle with something. Oh my gosh, I'm struggling with the same thing. A couple of weeks ago, I trained jujitsu. One of the best parts of jujitsu is just the community. And like before and after class, there's a bunch of 20-year-olds, 30s, 40, 50-year-old people just speaking. And there's someone around my age in there, and they're like, hey, what's up? I got this going on. He goes, well, I got this going on. And next thing you know, we're telling each other like really what we're struggling with. And then as I opened up, he opened up. As he opened up, I opened up. And we had this real conversation that, like, that feel you usually get after you work out. Well, I feel great. I got that endorphin rush. I had that before the class even started, because we had this 5-minute conversation off to the side warming up. You know what I mean? Like it kind of, we both had this like burden lifted by just talking about like, a couple things that were going on in our lives, right? But
Absolutely.
no, that congrats for having the courage to do that and helping so many people. Before we move on to what you're doing now, which is so much good stuff. I love the story of, I might have heard this on an interview you were on, the Lazy Lab, like the secret award. You went somewhere thinking you're going to speak to someone, but actually you were they wanted to surprise you with an award, but they didn't think you'd come.
Yes, I've been very blessed with different veterans organizations and the ability to be involved with them. And it's such an honor to help serve others through the works that a lot of these veterans organizations are doing. One of them in particular was, it used to be called Lazy Lab Hunting Club. And they would take veterans out free of charge and take them hunting somewhere. And it was usually for wild boar. Some of them were pheasant hunting, sometimes it was fishing. And a friend of mine, Thomas Bethman, who I knew from the Naval Academy, I ran into him at an Army Navy game and he introduced me to the CEO of Lazy Lab and we just had a conversation. Next thing you know, they would like me to get involved with Lazy Lab, and he asked me to go to further get involved to go speak. And so I was prepared. I packed my bags. I said yes. And I was prepared to go drive up to northern part of California to go speak to the veterans who were about to go hunting. But when I was in the car ride up there, that topic of conversation came up. And that's when they were like, oh, yeah, by the way, you're not speaking to the veterans this weekend. You are the veteran. And I was like, excuse me? And that's when they told me the truth, that especially Thomas thought that I wouldn't have gone because I don't really like to accept things like that. But I would go to help others. I wouldn't do it for myself. And he was right. He was right. So I did. I went up there and it was a wonderful experience. And I did. I got to go hunting.
So cool. So cool. Sometimes you got to lie a little bit to get to put people in the right spot sometimes. That's amazing. Congrats. So let's fast forward here to what you're doing today. I'll throw a couple big topics out and you could grab them as you like. Bodybuilding champion, Olympic athlete, boxing, nutrition and fitness coach, nickname Lisa Liberty. So cool. Speak to how you got into working out, what it does for you.
So fitness and nutrition has always been a very important part of my life, especially when I knew I was going to join the Marine Corps. I knew that I had to step up my level of fitness. Now, I'd been a varsity athlete for many years in high school, but I was about to join the United States Marine Corps, and I'm sure all of the other people that are joining are working on their fitness as well. So I needed to really get serious about it. So that's kind of how it started. And then when I woke up from one of my surgeries after Afghanistan, I was told I'd never run again. And I was devastated because when I was in Afghanistan in my like free time, which wasn't much, I would go running and I was specifically training to run the Marine Corps Marathon. So I was obviously very upset. And now I'm out of the Marine Corps and I can't run and I'm just lifting at a gym, which I do love to lift. I'm definitely a meathead, but the guy I was dating at the time found a boxing gym and he was like, I really think you should try this. I really think you're going to like it. And that's kind of how I got into the sport. I went and I did. I fell in love with it and I was very good at it. And I really enjoyed it.
And then how far did you take it?
I boxed just to train when I found that gym. I was living in Monterey. Then when I moved to Annapolis, I started at a boxing gym out there. And then I started fighting. Then I also started volunteering at the Naval Academy as an assistant boxing coach, just to give back to the midshipmen and to help in that sport. And then I moved to Baltimore and I continued to fight out of Baltimore. And at some point, I knew I wanted to try for the Olympics.
Wow.
And I had kind of fought all of the girls in my weight class and experience level that I could find. So I ended up really having to change weight classes in an unhealthy way very quickly. At that point, I knew about the gym in Los Angeles called Wildcard, and it's a famous boxing gym. Freddie Roach is the coach, and he's he's famous. He's, in my opinion, you know, one of the world's greatest boxing
Is
coaches.
that Manny Pacquiao's trainer?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So I
Wow.
called him up. Well, I called the gym and Freddie Roach answers the phone. He's that humble and down to earth. And I told him who I was and what I wanted. He's like, yeah, come on out. It's $5 a day. I'm like, well, praise God, because, you know,
Oh my
I,
gosh.
yeah, $5 a day. So I went out there, I started moving around, and they introduced me to their amateur boxing coach, who then took me all the way to the Olympic qualifiers. And I won the first fight at the Olympic qualifiers in Oxnard, California. And I lost the second fight, and that's when COVID hit and the 2020 Olympics were canceled.
That is crazy. Just jumping in there. That is crazy. Congratulations. That is so wild. So how do you spend most of your time now? What's your average day look like these days?
This last year has been quite different, a lot of changes. Recently, I'm no longer in the air wing for the Marine Corps. I'm back in the Marine Corps as a reservist now. I got back in several years ago, and I continued to be a Huey door gunner for many years. I continued to fly and do that job, and it was wonderful. I currently no longer do that. As of last month, I switched to a new unit. The Marine Corps is starting a small littoral craft company, and they're basing it off of Navy SWCC, which is Special Warfare Combat Crewmen, I believe. I'm not certain I have that term correct, but SWCC, Navy SWCC is basically a small boat unit of very highly specialized operators who move with the Navy SEALs and do inserts and extracts, etc., and other types of special operations missions. So the Marine Corps, part of Force Design 2030, is now starting that, basing it off of the Navy, and I got to be a part of this unit. So I've just transferred to that unit, and I'm going to help be a part of setting up this new development for the Marine Corps.
Wow, that is awesome. Congratulations. That is so fascinating. When you're in the reserves, what's the time commitment for the average reservist? What's required?
The minimum time requirement for a reservist is 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks at some point during the year. It's called
Okay.
annual training. When I was a flyer, that was not enough. So I was in multiple times a month and constantly on, you know, sets of orders, doing all these different missions, etc., which I loved. That was fantastic. Now at this new unit, it might look a little bit different because a lot of us have to go to schools to try to learn to bring back that knowledge to the Marine Corps and to set us up for success. So again, I'm not complaining. Hopefully it will be more than 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year.
Wow, that is awesome. Congrats. How about if you look in the future, like say next 5 years, what do you want to be doing? What do you want your day to look like 5 years from now? How about that?
5 years from now, I hope that I have been a part of not only setting up this unit, but a secondary unit for the Marine Corps, that they're two of them are operational, that we've successfully done this, and I've been able to help write the doctrine to change Marine Corps history. And then on the personal side, 5 years from now, I hope to be well within my second career within another federal organization.
Awesome. I have a non sequitur question I wanted to ask you 20 minutes ago, but I just keep coming back to it on my notes. So you're in the Huey door gunner, right? You said you shot a 50 cal and a 240 heavy gun, right? What's the difference between the two types of guns? What do you shoot out of the Huey? And then what's the difference between a 240 heavy gun and a 50 cal?
In the Huey, we have a 50 cal and a minigun. We
Okay.
also can shoot the 240, but that's not our main weapon. It's our egress weapon, but it is one we have to learn. There are many differences to all three of those weapons. The minigun is a 7.62 round that shoots 3,000 rounds per minute, approximately, and it's a 6-barrel electrically driven machine gun. The 50 cal is obviously a 50 caliber round, shooting at a much slower rate, but a much larger round with more capabilities such as armor piercing. And then the 240 is also a 7.62 round, which shoots at a much slower rate. It's a single barrel machine gun that fires from an open bolt position.
Thank you. You mentioned that multiple times in the story, and I just was curious about the differences. How about this? Wrapping up here. High achievers like you usually have a lot on their mind, have a lot going on. When you need to clear your mind and recharge your body, what do you do?
I think it depends. I don't have one thing, but I do have a small group of things that I do consistently for my mental and physical health to keep me happy and healthy and sane. I
Mhm,
work out regularly. I lift weights and I do cardio
mhm,
every week, multiple times. I go to church. I'm involved heavily with my church and my small groups in my community and church. I sing with my church on the worship team. It's a very big part of my life. The Lord has blessed me in more ways than I'll ever be able to remember to talk about. So that keeps me grounded and keeps me focused. And I think I always need a new challenge, whether I'm fighting in another boxing match or whether I decided to become a bodybuilder and do a show or whatever the case. I'm always looking for the next thing, whether it's professional or physical. I need to continue to be challenged.
Lisa, if you could have everyone listening take just one lesson away from everything we discussed, what would that lesson be?
That you are so much more capable than you realize. You can do anything you put your mind to. You can do whatever it is that your heart desires that is going to challenge you and push you further, even when you don't think you can. You actually can. It's just a matter of changing your mindset for you to believe it. And even when you're in the position when you're the only one who believes it and everyone else around you is telling you you can't, you'll never do it,
Mm.
you don't have to believe them because they're not always right. And I'm a perfect example of that.
Wow, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. How about this? Two fun questions to wrap it up. Lisa, if you could spend the day with anyone, alive or dead, famous, not famous, who would you want to spend the day with?
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. What would you do? How would you hang out? What would you do with Jesus?
Oh my gosh. I think I'd go fishing.
Would you? That's
Oh
all.
yeah, definitely. I would want to be on the boat. I would want to be on the water with him. And I have so many questions.
If I'm with Jesus, I think first thing we're doing, we're walking on. We're getting off the boat. We're walking on water. I want to walk on water. I'm like, let's go. Let's go. We're off the boat. We're jumping in, but I don't want to go in. I want to walk across. That's awesome. How about the last question? Lisa Bodenburg, if you had to get a quote or a saying tattooed on your body, what would that quote or motto say?
That's a good question. I think I always say you can do anything you put your mind to, and I'm here to show you how.
Oh, that's a mic drop. That's oh, that's all. You can do anything you put your mind to, and I'm here to show you how. That's
Yes.
fantastic. I think that is about as good as a spot as any to wrap this up. I want to end with this. This is how Jame Patterson, the #1 selling author of the world, ended his chapter on Lisa Bodenburg. This is from Lisa, and I would do it all over again in a heartbeat because I love the Marine Corps. I love leading Marines. There's nothing greater, no greater feeling, no greater responsibility or achievement. The guest is Lisa Bodenburg. The book is Walking My Combat Boots by Jame Patterson. Lisa, first off, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being one of the backbones of our country to keep us all safe. You are a baller. If people are looking for you and what you do online, where can we find you?
Instagram's the easiest place to find me. I have Instagram and Facebook for social media, but it's just my handle is Lisa Bodenburg.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to put your IG account and your Facebook in the show notes. Anyone looking for a motivational speaker, weight loss coach, just all around baller, give her a follow, give her a shout. Anyway, Lisa, thank you so much. Your story's amazing. I appreciate the courtesy of you coming on the show, and thank you for your service. Thank you for all you do for our country. Really appreciate you.
My honor. Thank you so much. You take care.